Hello once again, everyone. So this episode of Nitty Gritty, I believe we're on episode number 8. I want to talk a little bit about what listening is, right? Active listening, right? The idea here is, I've talked about it a lot. I've mentioned it when I get my point listening to me, when I get my point following me along a certain path, what have you. Well, what does that actually look like? So joining me today is Jake, my resident Italian. The idea here is listening can be very easily broken down into two categories. The category in which I am listening to him, or the category in which he is listening to me. Now, in general, the one that we want is the latter. I want him listening to me so that I can better control the fight. But there has to be both give and take. Because if he's only listening to me, and I unintentionally give him something I didn't intend to give him, he's gonna do what I told him to, and probably take an opening I didn't expect because I wasn't paying attention to what I was putting out as well. Now, the simplest form of this is just going to be in regards to guards, right? And for this, we're using longswords, but this is applicable to literally everything. Whenever we take certain positions, we are telling each other stuff, right? Like just there. I assumed a guard, Jake assumed a guard that he believes will counter it, right? And furthermore, we need to ask ourselves, how did he take that guard? Did he take it more passively? No, he didn't step back to get any distance from me, so he's pretty confident he can deal with what I'm throwing. Confidence is the key thing. He has just shown me, hey, this guard doesn't scare me, or if it does, I see it as something I can deal with. Now, on the one hand, that's good, because that means he's respecting me. He sees this as a threat. But on the other hand, it's bad, because he's shown me he's willing to party. So I may not take that opportunity. I may change to something else. Now, a different situation could come in. Let's take another guard. Here we go. One of us is in a guard, one of us is not. Because I put my point up in Jake's face, and he had to respond to it with what made him safer. He's back-weighted. His tip is moving, but he didn't get his feet in line. He's not creating a wedge. This is him 100% just listening to me. He doesn't have an idea of counter right now. Now, he might be able to do something off of here, sure, but for the moment, he's paying attention to what I do. So I want to keep him focused on that as I would then continue to drive. Now, those little moments will happen all the time, and these are just two examples with one weapon. But other little things that can commonly occur is just in regards to distance, which is where, before you get the sword work going, this is really what you want to pay attention to. So we'll step apart a little bit for this. We should be still in frame. So the idea of distance, we usually do not start out this close to each other, but the idea is when I'm moving around, it's a question of what Jake is doing in response to this. If I find myself stepping forward and he steps back, I step back, he gains ground, that's a level of listening, right? Is he just listening to me, though, or is he mirroring me? So if we find ourselves where he's just listening to me, right, he's respecting my distance. Oh, but he's changing guards, right? He's paying attention to what we're doing, and he's generally respecting my control of the flow of distance, but he's doing his own thing with it. He's probably getting ready to respond. Alternatively, you will encounter people that purely mirror you, right? I step forward, steps back, I change sides, he changes sides, right? And you notice it's not smooth, because he has to respond to what I do, meaning he's going to be about a tempo behind me. Now, you might think this is a good thing, because, oh, I can control him to go where I want him to go. No, this is actually a bad thing. If Jake is purely mirroring me, yes, that means that he's following along with what I'm doing, and I go, it's like, oh, well, I want to get a false on false bind. Perfect, I've gotten a false on false bind. Now I can do that thing. The issue is, while he's mirrored me the way I want him to stand, he is still his own person. And odds are, when I start doing the action that I want to do next, he starts doing what he wants to do next, which may or may not mirror what I was doing. I have seen people mirroring each other cut on the exact same line against one another. So generally, getting someone purely mirroring you is not a good idea, right? Now, you can't control that. He may choose to mirror you, come hell or high water. If you find yourself in that situation, see if you can't get him to make his own ideas, right? See if you can't give him more credible blade things to worry about and play from there. So for example, if someone is mirroring me pure body-wise and I notice it, I'll stop moving my body or move it only minimally and disguise it with focusing on blade work instead. Now he is becoming disconnected from me because he's dealing with this stimulus and not worrying about what this stimulus is doing. Now, that two-way street back and forth is the basis of listening. I've got someone moving around with me. I've got them respecting the positions I take, and I'm respecting their responses to it. confidence, fear, arrogance, all these things are stuff you can notice. It's all just basically body language, right? Which is a pseudoscience at best. But in regards to this, it's very applicable. Now, the next bit of listening is the actual fighting portion, okay? Choosing when to go forward, when to go back, etc. In general, if you can get him on a purely defensive turn, this is a good time to go forward. So for example, I throw a cut in, but Jake defends it, just defends it, but he defends it with the intent to then go forward. So Jake will not go forward on it, but he will intend to defend it. Okay, that's something active. Now, for some of the Germans probably watching, this breaks quite a few of our rules, but, remember, Jake is Italian, but two, he has intent here. He wedged this out of the way, and I can already see him poised and ready to go forward. The point of this is that it is up to me now to listen to him. Now, this does not mean, for, again, to use German terminology, that I'm purely in the Nacht now, right? It just means, oh, okay, you're going to fight me back. Cool, take that open, right? Something I can work with. If I know that when he parries, he's going to parry competently and then riposte, I can start building off those riposts with my counter hits. A different example, however, I attack in and Jake purely defends, but not well. No intent to riposte, right? So I throw in a cut. Okay. Now, again, I have him listening to me, but the way that he is listening to me is purely, let's deal with this one at a time. He will not see my next opening, whatever it may be, right? This is very easy to then drive somebody. Listening in this regard directly leads into driving. The idea of getting them usually between one or two openings, just and you just eventually overrun them. These are both examples of, okay, I can deal with this. Now, the more tricky thing, where you paying attention to them really, really matters, is as that goes then deeper. So let's say, for example, I get Jake listening to me in that purely defensive standpoint, right? And we'll just kind of stay in place for this. I've got him listening to me. I'm targeting one side then the other, right? God, I'm doing what I want him to do. At some point as I do this, I will show him, hey, I throw cuts to here. Meaning he will start timing what I'm doing, even potentially unintentionally, right? When that happens, what I need to be aware of is we're going attack, 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 attack. At some point, see how his parries are getting a little more competent. He's starting to settle himself, and that one is literally prepping for a cut. I can tell, right? I know you, Jake, right? That's the scary part, is knowing no one to hold, no one to fold them. Don't just get lost in the idea of, oh, he's defending, I can keep going forward. How is he defending? Because it may change over time, and odds are if you haven't hit him yet, it is changing. The very first strike, the one that takes him by surprise and gets him listening to me, yeah, that will probably not be a great parry. But any subsequent defenses, his only goal right now is to not get hit. He will do a better job of, as these cuts are coming down, solidifying himself, even against tricksy cuts like that, right? I went to a pulled thrust, something I very rarely do, but he's tuned into my rhythm. So, you can use this in a couple different ways. I could attack, maybe hit him. If I notice he's starting to become confident, maybe then I invite him to come back at me, which also ties into the idea of I attack, he parries confidently, let's hit him on the riposte instead. Because I'm listening back to him, it's very easy for me to kind of see this coming. Now, very easy, maybe a bit of a stretch, but the idea is when I have this kind of control, this isn't something I shouldn't see coming. Anyone can recognize when their attack has been defeated, and anyone can recognize when their attack has been defeated well, or if their attack has just been defeated, right? Now, also in regards to listening, is the time at which to go for target. So another common thing that you will see when people aren't listening to each other, and usually this also leads to doubles, is, and especially out of binds, right? We're here, we both know that we're not winning down the middle. And so we both go, well, I'll cut around to the other side. Dang, right? One of us wins, one of us loses, maybe we both lose. How to recognize that sort of situation. So what I tend to refer to this, and this is a big part of listening, I call this the samurai movie moment. If you've ever seen an Akira Kurosawa film, there's the idea that we both square up and we settle, and then the one cut will decide this. And that's fun, don't get me wrong, but the problem is, what happens when you do this is that I think of one possibility, he probably thinks of the same one, because it's the obvious one, and I'm not that smart of a man. He thinks about the follow-up, I think about the follow-up. I guess what his follow-up might be, he assumes what my follow-up may be, and now both of us have so convoluted our own idea of what he might do and what we think we're capable of, that there's no way we're going to correctly assume what happens. This leads to then a double pretty much every time. And it happens from two ranges. It happens either the pure samurai movie moment where we're all the way away from each other and then we go. And usually you'll notice like footwork stops when this happens. People just stop dead and they start thinking and then they go and then they die. The other time this usually happens is an obvious parries. Like again, both of us are long edge, we're both thinking and then someone goes and the hit happens. My recommendation, if you find yourself in this situation, he's not listening to you. You're not listening to him. You can't. It's not going to work out that way. Leave. Be the bigger man and walk away, right? So, let's use the guard situation. We're listening to each other. Oh, I bet you I can get this abscess and then he'll just cut from above. But he's like, oh, I'm not going to cut from above because I know exactly what he's going to do, right? See? So instead, when I find myself in that situation, I'm, you know what? No, right? Let's just see what he does. And who knows? Maybe when I step backwards, he starts coming forward again, right? Oh, hey, cool, right? You add that looseness. Let him then play the next hand, and you might get something out of it. In regards to if we're in an actual action, again, it's that, oh, I could cut it. Wait a second, this probably isn't a good idea, right? And just choose to instead, sometimes you may not be able to. Like, we may be relatively close, but still fighting with the blades. And this could be a snap second, right? But it's that moment of, this isn't going to end well for me, right? Let's just focus on covering. And I may actually stay where I am. Let him start to cut around explicitly to then react to him. Because while, yes, I am having to let him make the move, I'm the one who told him to make the move. I'm still in control. Now, that's a lot of high-level thinking, and I'm not always capable of it. No one's always capable of it. But the main thing that I want you to pay attention to when it comes to getting your opponent listening to you is, number one, are they listening to you kind of like an argument, right? Are they listening to you only to then say their own points to counter yours? Okay, in which case then, get them on the rebuttal. Or are they listening to you and you are overrunning them, but eventually they'll panic and walk away? I want to get him up to that point of, I know what you're doing, but not to the point that I can no longer guarantee it. And at the same time, I'm always watching for in case he decides to come forward or in case he decides to do something incredibly stupid. Because people do that under duress. You will do that under duress. When I'm attacking at him, I should check myself of, hey, I've attacked a couple times. I probably told him a little bit too much. And if you're not achieving something, leave. That's probably the hardest bit to get yourself to do. And this is where we kind of almost get more into listening to yourself, right? I'll just do 3 cuts, right? It's boom, 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 right? I did not achieve what I wanted to achieve. Let's leave under cover and call it good. That's hard to do. That's really hard. Easy to do in drill, hard to do in practice because you're like, I'm almost hitting him. I want to stay. The problem is, though, the longer you stay, the less you're listening to yourself, the less you're aware of your body position, and the more likely that he's gained the measure of you. Because he just spent the last 3 cuts purely defending himself. I spent the last 3 cuts wondering why I can't hit him. That's a huge morale break, right? So, and oftentimes, be aware of what your limits are. If I know that I can do 2 good drivings, maybe 3, and I can get him listening to me, okay, didn't get what I wanted. I thought about stepping up to hit, couldn't quite get it. Let's just leave. That was a good exchange. I won that exchange. He now learned something about me that scares him. I can get him to react off that. That's what listening should be. Knowing my own limits and figuring out his. So, deep topic, and I could probably go even more into it with other weapons and specific situations and that, but I think that'll do for right now, and we're kind of using the universal language of HEMA at the moment, so that ought to get the point across. So thank you very, very much, Jake. And thank you all very much for watching. Pay attention, listen closely, and see if you can't make fencing a bit less of a blur and a lot more of a kind of back and forth conversation. So, thank you very much for watching. We'll go over some other techniques another time.